Hello and welcome to Kings Point Spotlight. I'm Lieutenant Tyrone Broxton, and today I had the pleasure of being joined at the USMMA Waterfront with Lieutenant Commander Jablonski and Lieutenant Johnson, officers of the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Sir and ma'am, thanks for joining us here today on Kings Point Spotlight.
Good to be here.
Well, how difficult is your selection process with individuals competing from all across the nation?
Well, NOAA itself, like you say, is comprised of upwards of 14,000 employees. Only 321 are officers. Our max strength is 321 officers. And so when we are taking new officers, it's a very competitive process. You can't just apply and get into the NOAA Corps. The last class, we have a class here at Kings Point that's just begun. There's 14 new officers, and those 14 were chosen from 95 applicants. So it is a very competitive process, and what we look for is somebody who's well-rounded. They've done more than just gotten good grades. They have outreach, they've done extracurricular activities, they've had some leadership experience. Because as a NOAA Corps officer, you go right to your ship as a junior officer and you could be in command of a small boat, you could be in charge of a life raft, you could be in charge of some of the crew right away. So those skills, having gotten them somewhere else in life, help our new officers when they are selected.
And all of our applicants have to already have at least a bachelor's degree in math, science, engineering, something that pertains to NOAA. And so they're very competitive applicants. You know, it's pretty rare you get a dud in the batch. So you're looking at 95 very competitive applicants.
Now, you made segue to the BOTC 117 indoctrination class that's here now. What is the initial training process for someone becoming an NOAA officer?
Well, the initial training process, we bring them up here for 3 weeks of indoctrination. During that, they learn officership, leadership, they learn about the ranks, they learn how to wear the uniform and the customs and courtesies. They get, I don't want to say broken down as much as maybe one of the armed forces, but you know, we try and change them from an I, me to a we, us, essentially. After those 2 weeks, they go to a week of leadership and management training up at the Coast Guard base. And then they come back here for their nautical training, and that's pretty much what the midshipmen go through in 4 years. We try to cram into their brains in 4 months.
Okay. All right. Now, there are several sectors within the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. What are some of the key components of the administration overall?
As far as within NOAA, like Commander Jablonski stated, there are 6 different line offices, and there are NOAA Corps officers in every line office in one way, shape, or another, whether it's on a land assignment or driving a ship to support the research for the fisheries service, or doing charting for the National Ocean Service, driving small boats at one of the National Marine Sanctuaries on their land assignment, diving.
Through hurricanes.
Yep, flying through hurricanes. We have an aviation branch, or about 10% of the Corps are aviators. They do hurricane hunting, they do snow surveys, they do mammal surveys as well.
Your remote sensing.
Remote sensing, yep. LIDAR. There's a huge variety of skill sets that NOAA Corps officers gain. They take from an officer who has a basic science degree, and they teach you how to drive a ship. You go drive a ship, you go to land, you might be working anywhere in the country that NOAA has a presence. So the things we get to do are pretty hugely varied, and there are amazing opportunities, and we get to go and see really cool stuff that most people never get to go and see a lot of the time.
One of the biggest gee whiz billets is the Antarctic Station Chief, where they do atmospheric research. So when people ask me, what's the best assignment, depending on how adventurous you are, and those folks actually get to winter over in Antarctica. So there's some pretty interesting photographs if you look around.
They have a nice heavy coat.
Oh yeah.
They do a year of prep work, and then they do a year of debrief. So it's actually a 3-year assignment.
Wow.
With 1 year in the Arctic or in Antarctica.
Okay. Now, the United States Coast Guard has been very much in the limelight, from a media standpoint at least, when it comes to some of the recent incidents that have taken place in the Gulf. Hurricane Katrina, obviously, and then recently with the oil spill. So where's NOAA been in that process? Because I know they've been there every step of the way.
Yep. Well, NOAA has had a huge presence during the spill response for the Gulf here. We have officers manning at the Homa in Homa, Louisiana, which is the BP's Unified Command Center. We're running a subsurface monitoring unit, which is in control of all the vessels, any vessel that's out there doing subsurface research. NOAA has presence to track this information and get it, gather it, put it together so that it can be unified and looked at on a larger picture. Where's the oil? Where did it go? What is it doing? We have our fisheries vessels are out there pulling nets and doing CTDs and getting chemical information of the ocean around the wellhead, all over the Gulf actually. We have our aviators doing overflights during the spill, looking and tracking where the oil was on the surface on a daily basis. our administrator, NOAA, Dr. Lubchenko, was down in the Gulf multiple times working to make sure fisheries are closed when they needed to be closed. And they're slowly starting to reopen them now that they can see where the oil has gone away. If it's shifted out of a fisheries area, they test the food, they test the fish or the shellfish or whatever it might be, and are then controlled, because NOAA controls the National Marine Fisheries, which it's billions of dollars that it is commerce for the country. And so NOAA's not usually out in the forefront, but NOAA has a huge presence in supporting things like this for our country.
You also mentioned Hurricane Katrina, which is dating back a little bit for probably the kids that are going to be looking at this. Another of our missions is the charting, nautical charting, and one of the response efforts we do for hurricanes, and Hurricane Katrina in particular, is clearing the harbor of it for any obstruction. So, I mean, you have ships that are going to be anchored. They can't come in until they know that they're not going to hit an obstruction. The folks here will know how close the draft of a commercial vessel is to the bottom of the seafloor. And when you have a hurricane that comes through, it shifts things around. They don't know the safe path to come in. So all the commercial ships will be stuck in the harbor until our small boats can get down there and basically do a quick emergency survey and make sure that it's safe for them to come in. So we're pretty integral in reopening harbors after the hurricane.
Now, you just mentioned the charting. I found fascinating. 20,000 historical charts on record NOAA's been responsible for. So many people don't realize this, but NOAA really helps the merchant marine insurmountable.
Directly.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And the charting we're doing now is very high tech. If you look at charts that were made, 1950s and prior, they were all done with a lead line and a sextant. So you have fairly precise, depending on how good your person is with the sextant, fairly precise positioning. But as far as your sounding, you have a lead line, so you have a spot sounding, and then when they came out and they threw the lead again, you have another spot sounding. So they could have missed something. In between the sounding lines or the actual soundings. What we do now, we have what's called a multi-beam sonar, and then we have what's called side scan sonar. We're basically imaging the entire bottom of the seafloor. So we call it 100% bottom coverage. So those ships can come in safely, inches. There's ports where ships come in on a high tide because they can't come in at a lower tide. So they really push the envelope, and we're integral in keeping them safe.
Now, in the recent years, the last 2 years, or 2 graduating classes ago, we had Tamara Rule, who became a NOAA officer. How does a King's Pointer go into becoming a NOAA officer? What do they have to do? What classes do they have to take? What major would be in their best interest?
Our actual academic requirements are at least 48 semester hours of coursework that is math, engineering, or science that pertains to NOAA's missions, including college-level calculus or physics. And I know that the Kings Pointers all have the calculus and physics, which is great. As far as the ideal majors that Kings Point offers, I would consider the ideal candidate coming from here to be one of the marine transportation and technology majors. Like I said, technology is a big part of what we do. The marine transportation and the logistics majors they're very close, but they don't have quite enough of the science. We don't count the technical courses that we're going to give to these people when they come in and go through our basic training. So we're counting, of the marine trans and the logistics curriculum, the base courses, we're counting things like weather and celestial navigation, the advanced navigation that includes all the work with tides and currents, and stability. Which, I mean, if you don't know physics, you can't do stability. So they're the heavier science courses, but things like GMDSS and SOLAS and all that, we give you that. We consider that more of our tech training. So, and I mean, in engineering, obviously they would account. The problem we have with recruiting engineers is that they come out with an engineering license, and all of our officers are deck officers. So if they want to sail on their engineer license, they're not going to do that as a NOAA Corps officer. So like I said, the marine trans and technology seems to be our niche, as far as what would make them the most competitive for NOAA Corps.
We have lots of applicants that have not made the grade the first time, or they aren't eligible to apply, who go back to school. We have one of our officers that's here right now who's selected for this class, went back to get physics. He didn't have enough physics to meet the standard, and so he went back to school. And it's actually a pretty funny story. As he went into his first basic physics class, realized it was going to be way too easy, so he cut that one and went into a harder one. That's the kind of people that we look for.
That's a great attitude. I was very happy to hear that.
Exactly.
So yeah, that would, and actually sometimes if they change majors, we had a Kings Pointer apply for this last class that had started in engineering, so he had a year or two of engineering coursework, and then he changed to the logistics. So among all those, we were able to count up to 48. So it's less important what the actual title is on your degree. It's more important the actual number of semester hours. And and if people have questions, they can send student transcripts to the recruiting office. We review that stuff all the time.
Yep.
We're happy to help.
I greatly appreciate you providing some insight into NOAA, and hopefully we can generate a few more applicants your way.
That would be great.
Lieutenant Commander Jablonski, Lieutenant Johnson, appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
And that concludes this edition of Kings Point Spotlight. For all of us in admissions, I'm Lieutenant Tyrone Broxton. Until next time, act non-verbal and go Mariners.